What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone we got Paul from the Wise Man Sphere. Thank you so much for your time today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Alex. We're excited.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you here. The newest album, Valley of Kings, scheduled to come out on May 29th. Do you just want to talk about like how the making of this record was and like the recording, songwriting, mixing, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So this record, the writing process itself and the recording process was super smooth for us. We've been going to the same producer, Johnny Frank, up in Columbus, Ohio, for 3 records now, so this is the third with him. So since 2014, we've been doing songs with him, and he just really understands our sound, and our workflow is super duper quick with him, just because of how many songs we've done with him. But also, just from a writing standpoint, the collaboration on this record was the highest of any we've done before, so it was really fun to watch these songs blossom into something more than what they started as. In the past, we've written songs where sort of, oh, this is Cody's song, or this is Nathan's song, and then we'll try to sprinkle in elements. But on this record, it was a whole lot of just sort of cross-contributing and sort of influencing back and forth and completely revising songs in a really positive way. So that was all smooth. The only obstacles we ran into were on the video production end. We just had the worst streak of luck where 2 of our video directors for music videos had surprise surgeries sort of at the 1-yard line when it came to shooting, and that set us back months. And then there was a formatting issue for all of the story shots for one of our music videos, so that had to get reshot, and that was being shot in Detroit, so it was just this whole ordeal of getting actors back together and making the run, clearing out schedules and all that. But as far as the writing and recording process goes, it was easily our smoothest and most collaborative to date.
That's awesome. For these singles that you released so far, such as What Went Wrong and The Relics of Nihilux, could this almost serve as like a clear representation of what the whole album is going to sound like, or do you think that this is just like the tip of the iceberg, as I like to say?
Yeah, great question. So we actually, when we strategized for what we're going to do for a single, we kind of like to send out something that's on the 8 out of 10 heavy scale and something that's like the 2 or 3 out of 10 heavy scale. So the first one, we put out The Relics of Nihilux first, just to sort of reassure people that even though we signed to a label, they weren't having any bearing on our creative direction, and just sort of put to rest any fears about, us potentially doing softer radio rocking it, like a lot of bands sort of tend to do in the genre. And it also, the music video sort of helps with this, but that first track has a lot of story components to tell, so it sort of made sense for us to, get the first part of the story out there and tell as much of the plot that we could through a video, and then follow it up with something a little more broadly maybe appealing. What Went Wrong is closer to a radio single sounding thing, which we've done on every record, but we wanted to sort of with that first one and then really try to open up the reach with the second one. So I'd say the record has both heavier and lighter stuff on it, but those are 2 sort of averages of the different sides of our sound.
Yeah. You mentioned that there's like a story behind this album, and I always like asking this. I know you're the drummer and not the vocalist, so I don't know if maybe this is the most appropriate question to ask, but like you mentioned that there's kind of like a story behind this album. Could the story or the concept determine the outcome of the music itself, or did you guys have like a whole instrumental album done before like lyrics and a story came into play?
Yeah, dude, great question. So I play drums, and then I also write the concept for the storyline for our stuff, and then I'll collaborate with our vocalist to drill down actual final lyrics. But as far as the conceptual stuff goes, that's sort of where I get to geek out and flex that creative writing minor that I got once upon a time. But yeah, the story absolutely informs the sound of each record, and the way we tried to do it is going into an album, we'll determine sort of a set of sounds or a tonality that we want to achieve. So for our first record, we thought, let's do sort of classic medieval, like Gregorian choirs, and maybe some harps and some, whatever, just keeping it in feudal medieval Europe. And then second record, we sort of went more towards an Egyptian slant because that served the story, which was inspired by the mythos of Atlantis and King Arthur, so it had a more mysterious vibe to it. For this record, the plot line is kind of a cross between The Fellowship of the Ring and Journey to the Center of the Earth. And so we decided a sort of like ancient Celtic, sort of like hard fantasy, but mysterious vibe was going to fit it. So a lot of, we drew up a list of instruments that we wanted to going into it. So, we had this list, and after we tracked each song, we'd go back and be like, okay, can we fit a pan flute? Can we fit a bodhran? Can we fit a harp
That's interesting. You have a track on here called Breath of the Wild. I gotta ask, was Zelda at all an influence in the making of this album?
It was, yeah. So funny story, I haven't actually played Breath of the Wild, but my business partner who I live with, he got a Switch like a year ago or something. And he and his brother and my other housemate have just played the crap out of that game. So I would just watch them play for hours. It was really cathartic because the way that game's set up, I'm not sure if you played it, but it's just super open world, but it's done in a way that feels exciting rather than daunting. Like, I get weird decision paralysis when it comes to open world games. Like, I can't really play through Skyrim all the way, or Red Dead or Grand Theft Auto. It's like really hard for me to get through those games because I'm like, oh man, like, could I be having more fun if I went over on the side quest type deal? But yeah, that game just really drilled the excitement of adventure, and everything about that game just feels, like that childlike wonder of a new world. And so that was sort of the vibe that we wanted to capture on that track, because it's towards the beginning of the record, right as the company's setting out on their quest for the Valley of Kings, and they're all, sort of starry-eyed and excited for the world. Nothing seems out of reach for them.
Yeah, I just got a Switch in Breath of the Wild, actually, since the quarantine has been getting to my head. I'm less than a week into that game. I already got the Master Sword, beat all 4 Divine Beasts, the whole map of Hyrule, and I'm about halfway done with all the shrines, so...
If that's not a quarantine progress timeline, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Also, you're lucky you're able to find one. I hear that they're pretty much sold out in most places.
Sorry?
Because they're sold out. A lot of the Switches have been sold out from what I've heard.
Yeah.
And it's tough to find one right now.
Yeah, I got like the last one in Target, and it was kind of like tucked in like a corner somewhere, so I guess everybody missed it, so... You should have seen me in the store, like, sticking myself inside the shelf to grab it, and like somebody was like, "Can I help you?"
You're like, back away, it's mine.
But one thing I was curious about is, do you try to leave the concept of this album open to interpretation, or do you want to like engage the listener into what the story's about?
Yeah, we try to strike a balance. There's sort of 3 elements to each song that we sort of filter them through. So the first is, where does this plug into the whole arc of the story? So when we start writing a record, I'll peg out, however many songs you want to have on record, okay, points for what we talk about just in story terms. But the second thing is we want each song to be self-sufficient, and we don't want the story to, we don't want them to have the crutch of the story and not be songs unto their own. So making sure that even though they're contributing to a larger story, making sure there's a narrative within each song. But then the third layer is sort of sourcing it and pinning it back to real life. So a lot of the songs we're writing about like a fantasy universe, but it'll come from an experience of life, like watching family members age and health deteriorate. Like that's tough, and that's like one of those life experiences that everybody's going to go through, and that's sort of like quintessential pain of the human experience. So how can we take that and code that into a fantasy story, and then loop it into this overarching plot that makes sense in the terms of these characters, and can feel not specific to me, but it's just sort of a broader human experience, and sort of pin it back to that. So yeah, the songs, we want to leave it open enough to interpretation where they can be useful to people who don't know what our story is, but then if they want that extra layer of depth and they are willing to take the time to check out the story, that it's also, it's sort of as much as they want to get out of it, they can get out of it.
That's interesting to hear. Mastodon does that a lot, where they like take historical fantasy elements and then bring their own personal lives into it, like they did with that with like Crack the Sky and albums like that. And what I find unique is, like, if a person wants to be engaged in the story, wants to know what this whole narrative is, they should probably start with track number 1 and end with the final track, right? It's not like you don't recommend people listening to this album on shuffle, right?
Yeah, and actually that's a good point. Something that we have tried to do as a band is to create full records rather than just, a handful of singles that are put on the same disc. And streaming has definitely changed the game, but we're not resistant to that at all. Like, we're all huge music streamers. Some of our members collect vinyls as well, but like, at the end of the day, even if you're just streaming a song, for me at least, if I hear it enough times on shuffle, I kind of want to know, like, what's the story, or what is the sort of arc of this album, there's a missed opportunity for groups that don't create a cohesive work with an album and instead just focus on a bunch of like trying to make the catchiest hooks on 12 different songs or whatever. So yeah, we definitely recommend people listen through in order, and kind of try to make the story an incentive to do that. That's fun if you do it, but you're not missing out if you don't.
Yeah, I think so. It's fair to say you have like the best of both worlds. You could like make an album that people could just listen to for the hell of listening to it, but then if somebody wants an album that's going to engage them in a story and have like a sort of cinematic vibe to it, they could just dive right into it and be immersed.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely what we're trying to do.
Yeah. You mentioned that there's also characters that are demonstrated on this album. Is it fair to say that like the six of you guys are maybe portraying these characters if you were to play this material live, or are these just characters in the album like completely outside of who you are?
There's only 5 characters in the group that travels around, so unfortunately we wouldn't be able to directly translate like that. But so the characters are based on some cornerstone philosophical worldviews rather than inspired by people from life. So there's one that represents monotheistic existentialism, atheistic existentialism, nihilism, absurdism, and then there's a guy that is just a philosophically blank canvas. So the purpose of these characters for this record is to sort of create commentary on the pitfalls of certain philosophies and why they may not work, or at least how they interact with each other. But then also, one of the central themes of the record is the subconscious. So it takes place sort of, like I said, Journey to the Center of the Earth style, where the deeper the characters go into the Earth, the deeper into the subconscious someone's exploring. So there's sort of like the open-ended possibility of it being, each of the 5 characters being a segment of the one character's mind, and this just being like an exploration of his subconscious. But again, that's some stuff that is like fun to leave open to interpretation and experiment around a little bit with.
Yeah, it's fair to say that you would almost consider this album to be a concept album, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a concept album in a concept trilogy, so this is actually the 3rd installment of sort of the storyline taking place in this made-up universe Numa that we started writing for back in 2014. So it's kind of fun. They're character callbacks and they're sort of tie-ins, but this record takes like 1,000 years in the future relative to the events of the last 2. So it's been a fun place it in the same world, but break free from directly dovetailing the stories and really force ourselves out of that comfort zone.
Yeah. Are your albums almost kind of like Lord of the Rings? Do you recommend that people also listen to your first albums before moving on to this one?
Yeah, I think if you're in it for the story element, you get a whole lot more out of it that way. And in fact, the last song on this record bleeds directly into the intro track of our first record to create this sort of like infinite loop feel. So, it's one of those deals where it's like, if you really want to get the most out of the story component, we definitely recommend that. But we also feel confident that, like, if you don't care about the story, or even if you've never heard about the story, that if you just listen to the record, it just stands on its own 2 feet.
Yeah. Do you find it maybe the longer that you're working on a song or a project in general, especially that this is a whole trilogy that's over a long span of time, do you find it harder to maybe capture a moment depending on how long you work on something, or is that not even really like a priority in the band?
Wow, dude, good questions. So when you say capture a moment, are you talking about, commit a feeling or a message to a song?
Yeah, like representative of like what the bandmates were feeling at that particular time in a way.
Right. Well, honestly, that's like an advantage of the sort of metaphorical approach that we've been taking, where it's funny. Like, we joke as a group that we're these middle class, like suburban white kids from America that are writing like really angry music. So at times it feels like we have no right to do that. So it almost serves as a we're being like using it as a vehicle to translate the emotions from these made up characters. So at times, at times it can feel like, well, I don't feel the same way I did towards this person back when this was written. But we sort of get to distort that by being like, well, okay, so it's this character and he's, experiencing this emotion towards this other character. And it lets you sort of remove yourself from it a little bit and make it about something bigger than what you were feeling at the time. But then, the flip side of that being, hopefully you can feel like it's relatable after the fact.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You ready for the most difficult question of the whole interview?
Hit me, man.
How do you know when a song is done?
Oh gosh. I would love to say it's just when we listen to it back in the studio and everybody's just got like a goofy grin because it just is working. And there's like especially the kind of music that we write, there's a point of saturation where you can do too much for sure. Like, if we have this pan flute breakdown going down and we also have, a crazy harp sweep and all these choirs, it's like you can have too many layers. So, the way that we write is we'll track all the instrumentals, we'll record the vocals, and then we'll go back and just listen through the song and think, okay, where does it seem, not necessarily thin, but where is there enough breathing room that we could add something in that's not going to detract from it? So usually we'll go through and we'll add, 3 or 4 fantasy elements on each song, and that's about the limit. That's such a hard question. There's no formula to know when a song is done.
Yeah.
It's just something like you figure it out once or twice, and then with practice, it starts to become easier to determine.
Yeah. Well, you have a record label, so you could just say when the label approves it, and then there you go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just defer to them.
Yep. And I have a couple more questions for you. But being a drummer, like I love asking drummers this, but do you sometimes have a whole drum pattern laid down before the band would write their arrangements over it, or do you need music before you lay down the rhythm and the beat and everything like that?
Yeah, dude. So the way that we write is a little bit different to other bands from what I've heard just talking to other guys. But we'll basically write a bunch of instrumentals. I'll write a bunch of concepts and lyrics, and then we'll just play mix and match until the final songs appear. But as part of that instrumental writing, we'll have our one guitarist, Nathan, sort of take the lead on making the structure. Our other guitarist, Cody, will write a skeleton. On this record, we had Tyler and Joe, our vocalists, also wrote guitar structures. But yeah, there have been tracks where I just started, cracked up on Pro Tools, and then just write MIDI drums for an entire song structure. And then, that's when the collaborative process starts. And I'm like, hey, Nathan, what do you think about this? Like, if you had to write a part over this, what would you do? He'll be like, oh, okay, this is cool, but like this part doesn't really feel like it's going to flow well. And so bounce back and forth. But yeah, occasionally we'll come in with songs that are just written drums bound up and try to add, flesh on top of that.
Yeah, I'd imagine that's got to be so weird though, laying down a whole drum pattern and then like every arrangement that would come over it is like always one beat over or under the whole thing, and then it always just sounds out of time.
Yeah, it's like a weird, almost lifeless way to start a song at times, but it is fun whenever I'm practicing and I sort of figure out a beat that it's like, oh, like that's fun to play or whatever. It's cool to like guarantee that that's going to be in a song and like just start with that and then build the before and the after to that piece around it,
Yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed this discussion. Is there just anything else that you would like to promote for the band? Obviously, thanks to a certain virus that shall not be named. Yeah, I don't want to give it any promotion. Is there just anything else with the Wise Man Sphere you would like to promote? I mean, obviously, when this is all over, it will eventually be over. We could be expecting to see you guys on the road quite soon, right?
That's the goal, man. Yeah. We're hoping to do some touring in support of this record. Again, we'll just have to play it by ear. But in the meantime, yeah, we're super excited to be on Sharp Tone Records. The first time we've released through a label, and so far we've been loving what they've been doing with us. They're a phenomenal team. They're doing great work. But yeah, just check out Valley of Kings. It's coming out May 29th, and we really like it. We hope other people do too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Everybody, we are here with Paul of the Wise Man Sphere, The Valley of Kings, coming out May 29th on Sharp Tone Records. Be sure to pick that up, and we will see you next time on Heavy New York.